Welcome to the Divine Purpose Podcast, where we transport you along one of the more dynamic journeys of life. Have you ever been curious to know what it takes to become a successful leader? Or about knowing the secrets of life through the Bible? How about engaging in conversation where no topics are off limits? We will take you to new levels with guests who can help you grasp the importance of your calling. Now, here's your host, Eddy Dacius, founder of Dacius Facilities Management.
Hey, everybody. This is Eddy Dacius, the host of Divine Purpose Podcast. We have a wonderful guest for you today, a great show. I'm very excited. I'm always excited to start this show. Every Wednesday, we're going to have a new episode. You can check us online at DPPodcast Live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, and on our website, www.dppodcast.com. This episode is brought to you by Dacius Facilities Management. Dacius Facilities Management, they will manage your property with a variety of services such as cleaning, maintenance, and vendor management. We're going to introduce you our show. This is our 10th episode. We're excited to have Barry Braunstein. Barry Braunstein is an engineer and is a headshot photographer. So we have Barry Braunstein with us today. Hey, Mr. Braunstein, how are you today?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm good.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for coming in, and
Sure.
we really appreciate with us today. So we always start to know who is Mr. Barry Braunstein.
Okay, so let's see. I've had a long career. I actually started working when I was 13 years old, and worked in a hi-fi stereo store back then, and became a geek. So I love electronics. I love all sorts of things like that. So I decided to become an engineer. But during engineering school, I also decided that I didn't want to just do design. I really loved sales because I had actually done some selling part-time to work my way through school, and when I was in high school as well. And so when I graduated with my engineering degree, I said, I want to get into technical sales. And so I started working in the semiconductor industry. I worked for Texas Instruments, and then a little company at the time called Intel. And then 40 some odd years later, I had worked for large companies, small companies, startups, in sales management. I did some marketing. And after 40 some odd years, I said, I need a change. I got a break. I got to do something different.
Really?
Yeah, amazing, right? And so, and I just didn't leave. I mean, I started thinking about this while I was working for a company, and I really looked at what I love doing, and I love photography. And I'd been shooting since I was in high school, and I had done, I always had a camera, and I had a darkroom for a while, and I used to process color, and I even did some, paid work. I mean, I was on a magazine cover one time, Neshoba Valley magazine, I think, circulation of maybe 100 people.
Wow.
But anyway, so I loved doing it, and I started doing some volunteer work at our high school here. One of our daughters was she was in the performing arts, and so she did plays and concerts and things. And so I started volunteering to shoot, the actors and actresses and the plays and everything. And parents loved the work and wanted to hire me to do their families and headshots and everything. And it just kind of, one thing led to another, and everything sort of came to a head. And it was like, you know what? I just want to go off and do this. And so, I started researching photography and a photography business, and started talking with photographers, and understanding a little bit about the business and what aspect of photography I wanted to focus on, which was headshots.
Okay.
And the reason I did that is that I have a pretty extensive network in the business community, in high technology and biotech and places like that, as well as that's where my sales and marketing experience is. So I said, I know how to work with businesses and large corporations, small businesses, etc. And so I said, I'm gonna do headshot photography.
Wow, that's excellent. That's good to hear too. But we like to go in a slow space in this podcast.
I have a tendency to talk fast.
And that's good. You give me a lot of way to ask questions. So let's move forward, backward a little bit on your education. Where you went to school to be an engineer. So what was the process? Was it something you really enjoy doing?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I grew up in New York on Long Island. My parents were uneducated and hadn't graduated even high school, and we struggled growing up. I mean, I remember my mother actually stealing food from the supermarket so we could eat. And my father was adamant that I was going to get a college education and be successful and all of this other stuff. And they were pushing me to become a lawyer and an accountant. And I was like, that didn't really thrill me, and so I started developing this interest in electronics.
Okay.
And actually, I built a color TV set from a kit when I was 15 years old and just loved doing that. I mean, I did it in 3 weeks, just every day I'd get up and just solder and put all the wires together and everything. And the damn thing worked. Wow. When I plugged it in, it was like, whoa, that was cool. And so, I just looked into it and talked with my guidance counselor at the time and decided that I was going to get an engineering degree.
Question, sorry to cut you off, but did you have any second thought on where you wanted to go?
No, I was pretty adamant that, once I made my mind up, I was like, no, the engineering sounds good. It looked interesting. And this was in the days when chips, semiconductors and stuff, they were really starting to become more mainstream. And, it was the explosion of all of that stuff. And so I said, it just fascinated me. What did change, however, was that I realized that I didn't want to, while I was going to school, and I went to Worcester Polytech in Worcester, Mass, as an engineering school. And I decided that, I didn't want to be an engineer in terms of designing circuits all day long. It just looked, it looked kind of not as interesting as I wanted it to be. And I always had a fascination with business. And I had worked, as I said, I started working when I was 13. When I was 15, I actually got promoted and I was the only part-time salesperson in this hi-fi store on Long Island. It was a high-end hi-fi store. And I did very well there for, a part-time high school kid who was doing this on the weekends and stuff. I remember my first sale, I was a stock boy first, and we got busy in the store, and my boss said, can you help some people here while the rest of us are doing what we're doing? And I said, sure. So I did. And the first customer I talked to, I sold them a stereo.
Wow.
I remember going up to my boss saying, hey, Neil, okay, this guy wants to buy this. What do I do? And I love doing it. And so when I thought about it, I was like, I want to marry my abilities and skills that I have and things that I liked about dealing with people and business and all of that stuff with technology. And that's when I decided to pursue, in fact, I remember being in school and talking to my classmates and saying, I want to get into technical sales. And they were like, what? why are you doing that? You're going to get an engineering degree. I'm like, yeah, exactly. And the financial aspects of it also were attractive because, salespeople made, good money. And also, the harder you worked and the more that you were able to leverage your skills and all of that stuff, the more you could make. Okay. Because you were partly on commission and all of this other stuff. So, to me, it just seemed like a natural kind of move. And so I graduated, I got my degree, and when I graduated, it was the height of the recession, but so I wound up selling jeans in a jeans store for like 4 or 5 months while I was applying to all of these companies to get a job. And finally, I'll never forget, on the same week, I got 2 job offers, one from General Electric and the other one from Texas Instruments. And so first I accepted the job with GE, and then TI came along and they bumped up my pay by like 30%. And it just sounded a lot more interesting because it was semiconductors, and that was, like I said, the kind of the up and coming thing. So I jumped and I went to TI, and I just packed my bags. And at the time I was living with my parents down in Florida, because they had moved down there because of my mother's health. And I just packed my bags and I figured out on a map where was Dallas, and I drove to Dallas.
Wow. You drove?
I drove, yeah. I had a little sports car, and I packed everything in the sports car, and it was hot as all dickens. I didn't have air conditioning in the car, and drove to Dallas. And when I got to Dallas, they said, we're going to send you down to Houston. So I didn't even bother unpacking the car. I just turned around and I found it on the map, and I went, okay, well, I'm going to go down to Houston. Wow. So I drove down to Houston and started working down there, and, found an apartment, and I'd never really been away from home. So this was all first time for me, other than going to college.
But what was the adjustment in a new city?
It was interesting. It was interesting. Texas at the time was a bit different than living in New York. Okay. They carried guns down there and rifles in their trucks, and you'd get up in the morning and you'd hear about a cattle truck had overturned on the freeway. That didn't happen in New York. Wow. And so it was different. Houston was kind of it was an interesting place. Dallas was, when I moved to Dallas, so I was in Houston for 3 months, and then they moved me to Dallas. Dallas was a lot more what I'll call cosmopolitan, just sort of more what I was used to. And I liked Dallas. Houston was just kind of hot and muggy, and it was kind of the Wild West down there. Dallas was a lot. I liked Dallas a lot better. Yeah. But, I had always loved Boston, and for some reason or other, I wanted to move back to Boston. And one thing led to another, where I was working at TI, and I wanted to get into the field, into the field offices. And I had developed a relationship with the people up here in Boston for TI. And it turns out that a sales job opened up. And I heard about it, and I called the manager and said, hey, I'd love to come up and work for you guys up there. And they knew me, and they said, sure. So next thing I know, I was packing my car again. Wow. And driving up to Massachusetts. And that's where I've been since 1976.
Wow. Since then.
Yeah.
But how was it for you combining sales and engineering?
It was, it was a lot of fun because, particularly as I got later on in my career, because people have a stereotype of salespeople.
They do.
Yeah. I mean, it's not exactly the world's, most beloved profession in terms of, stature and how people believe you and all of this other stuff. And, but my approach was always very different. Number one, I wanted to be able to sleep at night, having a clear conscience. And so I was always honest with people, and just that this is what I think, and here's the data, and this is, I don't know, was common. I don't know, let me go find out for you. And, just not trying to lie to people just to get a sale.
Okay.
That's not me. Me is somebody who you can rely on to tell you the truth and tell you what I think and do the best I can for you. And so what was interesting is that when I go into an account and I started calling on it, a lot of the people who I was dealing with, at first reaction was, treating me as a typical sales guy. And not having a technical background. And the fact that I had the technical background and that I wasn't a typical sales guy, I was able to develop more, I would say, deeper relationships and more respect for my clients because, I kind of understood, at least to some level, what they were talking about. Even when later on in my career, I was working for an engineering services company that designed products for people. And they were mechanical engineers, and my background was electrical engineering. But I knew enough about engineering and enough about mechanical engineering, having been in and around it for so long, that I could still sit in meetings and add value. And I'd ask questions about stuff I didn't understand, and I didn't say things that I didn't understand and make comments about things that I didn't know anything about. But then the stuff that I did come up with and I did know, I would speak up. And actually remember being in a meeting with a client and I looked at something and they were struggling with an idea and I just looked at it from a different perspective. And and I came up with something and they all kind of looked at me and they said, wow, that was pretty good for a sales guy, I was like, wow. And we had developed a relationship at that point. So, but those kind of things I love because, it was as you said earlier, it's the marriage of, engineering and sales together and still adding value to the client, which is, what I've always tried to do in my career.
So was it your main motivation to, I know you say you started working part-time at a sales store, right? But was it always your motivation to combine, or did you have to down on your engineering education, you think that should be the way you would be successful to combine both sales and engineering?
I wish I could say it was all thought out as well as it should be. Yeah. But it was more of, I felt like engineering was a very limited kind of thing in terms of a profession, for me anyway. And with sales, I had a lot more freedom and flexibility and, getting out and meeting people. And it was a different kind of pressure. It was less of a technical pressure and more of a, sales pressure, but I felt very comfortable selling. I always felt, even as a teenager, frankly, I felt more comfortable talking with adults than I did with my peers. And so, to me, it wasn't any real epiphany. It was just kind of something that evolved. And I don't even remember even discussing with my parents. It was just kind of like, well, I want to get into technical sales. Wow. And, like I said, these weren't like long involved conversations or research or anything. It was just something that I think I had sort of absorbed over time. But I don't even think I knew any technical salespeople when I was in college. Yeah, no, I think it was just one of these things that, let me just try this. And it turned out to be, a very successful move.
Decision. No, definitely. But I think that was a bold decision, especially because we had a guest. She said what she's doing, she's a producer, but she said she never had anybody as a mentor.
Yeah.
But for you, or was it so? Because my question would be now, what is required to be a good technical sales person?
So I think the first thing that I would say is for technical salespeople or just anything in sales, you have to be a good listener. and I used to manage sales teams, and one of the things that a lot of sales guys used to do is I used to call showing up and throwing up. That they'd show up at a sales meeting, and the first thing they wanted to do was pull out the slide deck and start talking about their product and how wonderful it is, and speeds and feeds, and it can do this and it can do that and everything. And they never even knew what the customer's problem was that they were trying to solve.
Yeah.
So I learned, actually, as I think about it, I learned it in the hi-fi store. When I would go up to a person at the hi-fi store, I first would ask them, what kind of music do you like to listen to? And what do you like, more bass? Do you like more treble? Do you like more vocal? And then in my mind, I would start pulling together different pieces of, we had different speakers and different amplifiers and all of this other stuff. And certain sounds were sounded better with certain types of music. Certain equipment sounded better with other different kinds of, classical versus jazz or something.
Oh.
And so I learned early on that the key thing is to find out what are you looking for? What's the problem you're trying to solve? Before I start saying, hey, I got the greatest thing since sliced bread,
Yeah.
And I do that now even in photography. I mean, this, we the first time before anyone sets foot in my studio, or if I go on location, we're going to have a phone conversation, and we're going to talk about what the look is that you're going for, how you're going to use the images, what's your branding, what's your messaging, all of that stuff, right? Because before I start to think about in any sales situation, what's the right solution, I need to know what the problem is. And so in technical sales, when I was working for Intel, we had a catalog of microprocessors and memory and all of this other stuff. And so, what would I recommend? I don't know. Let's sit down and talk about it. And a lot of times the engineers there already knew what they wanted. They had done the research. But still in all, I still want to know how they're using things and what challenges they have, and what's their price point, and how big a form factor is it, and all of these things that you'd want to understand, so that even if they had made a decision as to what they were going to use, you might still be able to even recommend something else that they hadn't thought about or not known. So one of the key things is really listening and asking the right questions.
Okay.
Yeah, that's absolutely critical. And I like to, contrary to what's going on here, I like to, in a sales call, I would not talk that much. I'd ask more questions. And the more questions that you ask, and you listen to the response, and then you may ask a follow-on question, that shows that you're listening.
Yep.
It shows that you care, that you're really interested in what the person has to say. And, when you're talking with somebody and they ask you questions about you or what it is that you're talking about or whatever it is, you just want to talk more.
No, definitely.
Right?
Definitely.
And so, the marriage of technical and sales, it's a lot about selling skills. The other thing, though, when you're in a technical environment, is that I was comfortable going, if we start up here, which is very high level, versus going down here into the technical details. I knew where my limit was, and I would be very upfront with my customers to go down to that place. And then if they start digging deeper to the technology where I didn't feel comfortable, I'd say, hey, I'm not sure, I'm not the right guy for that, but let me get the right person who can answer that question for you, right? And I would bring those resources into the sales situation. So, that's kind of how I married the two. And to this day, I'm still a geek and I still love technology. And even when I'm mentoring people in photography or whatever, I will marry some of the technical with other things just to explain stuff to people.
Thank you for sharing, and I appreciate what you telling us now. But my other question is, because you just mentioned your parents' education was not the same as you are now.
Yep.
In motivation, was it from them, or was it you wanted to do better?
I think it was both.
Okay.
It was definitely both. I was clear. I think it was clear seeing my parents struggle.
Okay.
And knowing what we went through and stuff, that I was not going to do the same thing. And so I was pretty clear I was going to get a college education and I was going to be successful. And of course, my parents wanted me to be successful. My father was adamant. In fact, I remember after graduating high school, I floated the idea of taking a year off in between high school and college, even after I had gotten accepted. And he had a nutty.
Oh.
He was like, "No, you're not doing that.
You're going straight, definitely."
Yeah, you're going straight to college." And frankly, it was one of those things I hadn't really thought about. And what would I do for a year? And I didn't have any money to travel the world or whatever. So, his having a nutty was a good idea. But no, it was a combination of things. I definitely wanted to go to college and get an education, and I think it's obviously not for everybody, but I do think it helps you think.
Yeah.
And that was the one thing that I came away from engineering school to this day is that an engineering education, in my mind, helps you think and organize things and take a look at a problem and dissect it and then figure out the pieces, how they fit together, and then come up with a solution, that solves a lot of things. And it's a mindset more than anything else. And I'm very appreciative of that.
So one thing we like to ask, and because all our guests, this is a common answer where they said college was a way, like a new adventure where they learn about themselves. So how was the transition for you?
That's interesting. So I was an only child. I led a fairly sheltered life. My parents really let me out of their sight. And so going to college to me was finally, like breaking free, if you will.
Freedom.
Yeah, party and drinking and, all of that other stuff. And so I did a lot of the things that most people doing, or a lot of people do in college, breaking all of the rules and stuff. And what was interesting is, and I wasn't a party animal, but I definitely explored things and did things that, you do in college. And my junior year, I'll never forget this. I remember, was at a party and doing some of the stuff and everything. And I had this epiphany where I just said, the problem with doing all of this is that at some point you got to come down and you got to face reality.
Yep.
And I stopped.
Wow.
I just gave up, I'd have an occasional beer and everything, but I gave up any of the other stuff. And I just realized that, there's more to life than just doing all of that.
Yep.
And,
definitely.
So I started.
Trigger this, or you're thinking?
I remember looking at myself in the mirror in a bathroom.
Okay.
Literally, like, what the hell are you doing?
Wow.
And I'd been thinking, I played like some sports, and I just noticed like I was playing intramural softball and my timing was off and my brain was not as sharp as it was. And it was just a bunch of things where I just said, you know what, I got to stop this crap. But, you go through various phases in your life. There was that phase, and then I went to work, and I had to have another epiphany at some point of taking work a little bit more seriously than I did. And I see this now in my kids, or my kid, our oldest, who's working. You reach different levels at different points in your career. And then as you mature and grow, that you realize that there's, everything isn't just a game.
Yep.
There really are consequences for things, and you really got to think about what you're doing and why you're doing it and how things appear, and how you're perceived and things like that. So, you go through a number of phases, and hell, I'm still learning, I'm still growing and realizing stuff that I've done that I would do differently going forward. And I think that's critical for anyone who's growing, wanting to succeed in life, or, in any venture. Even as a parent, good Lord, I learn as a parent every day still.
No, definitely. So we're just gonna jump to you, 40 plus years in technical sales, and now you have to retire. What was the process? Take me there, man, because I think that's a very interesting adventure for you. And what was
Yeah,
the decision making?
yeah. So it's interesting. When I was younger, I always said that I'd never retire and I always wanted to work. And then as I was getting on in my 40 plus year career, I realized that, well, I don't know about that, but I don't want to be doing this all for the rest of my life, you know? And so there was a moment, which I won't get into too much detail, but while I was working for the company that I was working for, the CEO and I had a different viewpoint on things.
Okay.
And that was kind of the trigger where I just said, you know what? It's time.
It's time. Yeah.
It's time. And so I offered to consult for him, and I actually wound up consulting for the company for about a year and a half. And did some consulting work while I was also pursuing my photography business.
Okay.
And so I did that for about a year, doing year and a half, did both of them together. And then I realized that in order to grow my own business, photography, I couldn't do it part-time.
Part-time. Okay.
Yeah. Growing your own business, by the way, this is probably one of the hardest things I've ever done. Even with all of my experience in business and negotiation and marketing and yada, 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 it's different when it's somebody else's business. Yeah. You know, this is my business. And so it's my baby. Yeah. And I have no delusions of grandeur in that this thing has to be hugely successful or any of that other stuff, but I do want it to be successful and I do want to grow it. So, but I've realized that it's different. It's a little bit different in terms of marketing and things like that. A lot of what I've learned over the years from experience is translatable and has translated very well. But it's still very, very hard. You know, who the hell is Barry Braunstein Photography, you know? And how do you, where do you start? Yeah. And how do you grow branding, it? And, yeah, branding, messaging, website, who's my client? Oh, yeah, it's all of this stuff. And then building up a portfolio of work so that people could see it. And then,
your work,
all of the stuff. And then, so now I've got it to a point where, I've obviously got a website. I've got business. I've got corporate clients. I've got individual clients. But it's taken a couple of years. It's taken a couple of years to get there. And it's, I'm at it every day. I'm up at 5:00 in the morning. I work out from 5:30 to 6:30, and I'm at my desk between 7:30, 8:00 in the morning, and I'm doing this all day long. And most of it is not shooting. Most of it is trying to grow the business.
So you technically didn't stop working or retired, quote unquote. You were progressively working, and it's like you switch priority where your full-time became your part-time became your full-time, and then you quit the other job, right?
Yeah. And then also the other thing though is that the pressures are different.
Yep.
This business, I didn't create this to feed the family kind of thing. Right. Fortunately, because it's a hard business to grow. There's more starving photographers out there, and I knew this all along. But there's more starving photographers out there that are than successful photographers. Yeah. And by the way, I think that's true for a lot of businesses. Anyone starting their business, and I've done some business consulting for folks. When you start your own business, it's very exciting and it's great to be your own boss and all of this other stuff. But man,
reality gonna eat. Oh man!
Don't drink your own Kool-Aid. Okay, if you're not planning for failure after failure after failure until you start seeing success, and that it's going to cost you more money and it's going to take you more time than you think it should or that you plan on, that's when you truly can fail. It's when you plan that it's going to take longer. You don't work so it's going to take longer. You work so that but you got to plan ahead and make sure that you've got the financial wherewithal and everything else so that you're not putting yourself and your family in financial difficulty while you're trying to grow this thing, because it's hard.
It's hard. You're right.
It's incredibly hard.
I'm not gonna leave you off the hook. We're gonna go deeper, Barry. Give us some more, because that's why this platform is to help people understand the reality of it.
Sure.
Yes, it's nice to have your own business, but understand what it takes to get there.
It's gonna take much more time and effort, depending on what your business is, of course, but it's going to take more time, effort, and money than you think.
Yes.
And a lot of it has to do with being known, becoming known. Unless you've come up with an idea that's, you come up with an idea that's going to make money instantly, or, everybody really wants, you've got to do so many things to test markets. You've got to go talk to people. You've got to build a network. You've got to get those first clients. Everything takes longer and is harder than you think. And you also got to realize that don't get enamored through some initial success.
Okay.
At least for me, that I've seen, the business goes up and down. It's lumpy.
Yep.
Services businesses, I'm sure right? Until you're in it for a number of years and stuff, it's real lumpy. And photography in particular it's not like if you're a cleaning service, right? Where you have a client and you're there every month to clean their offices or whatever, right? I do my job. I do a great job. I'm done.
Yeah.
So now I got to go find the next client.
The next
right?
project.
Exactly. And so that's what makes businesses like photography so difficult, is that you don't have this kind of ongoing business that, clients are coming to you every month or every couple of weeks or whatever it is. You're always trying to find the next client and everything. And ideally you get corporate clients that, and I have some of these where, you're their preferred photographer, and as they're hiring new people, they send them to you. And so that starts to generate this base level of business. But in any business that you're trying to grow, that's what you want to get. You want to get a base level of business that you can survive on, and you have to manage your expenses and spend so that you can survive on this. And then the stuff that comes in over that is, quote unquote, gravy and play money, and allows you to invest further or whatever it is. But you got to make sure that your business can support you in terms of what you need and build that base level of business. And that's also hard. It takes time, because you're going into whatever it is the business is. Nobody knows you.
Yeah. Yep.
And getting people to be just generating awareness is one of the key things. So, I've joined half a dozen networking groups. I'm on LinkedIn every day. I'm going to meetings. I'm just networking with people. I'm reaching out to people. I've got a multi-level marketing approach where just trying to get the word out, in addition to the website, just building a website in and of itself. If that's that's not a marketing strategy. That's a piece of marketing that you need, but that's not a marketing strategy. You've got to do a whole bunch of other things on a consistent basis and adjust and all of this other stuff so that you can get yourself known.
So what do you think networking is so important to grow any business?
Because a number of things. Number one, people always want to help people. I mean, for the most part, people like to help people. I know I do. People can open up doors for you. And when you're trying to grow your business and meet new clients, cold calling is probably one of the least effective methods for growing sales and growing your business. Because people like to do business with people who they know, they've met, they trust, or whatever, right? And so, hi, I'm Barry Braunstein, headshot photographer. Here's my website. Looks great, right? Okay, but there's 5 other headshot photographers who are also very good. But if the person who I'm trying to close or the company knows somebody who's been a client of mine, and they can check up on me, if you will, be a reference or whatever, that gives me instant credibility.
Credibility, yes.
Right. And I even did this before I started my business. There was a job, it was a startup company that I had, when I was looking to change jobs a number of years ago, I found this startup that looked like they were doing something really cool. And so I looked on their website, saw who their management team was, and they had an opening for somebody in my position, what I was looking for. And so rather than just sending a resume in over the transom, I went in and saw who was on the exec team. And I went into LinkedIn to see who I might know or who I'm connected to that might know someone. And I also looked at who was on their board and everything. Well, it turns out I was somehow connected to one of the venture capitalists who was sitting on their board. And so I reached out to him and sent him my resume. My resume went to the top of the pile and I got the job.
Wow.
And I even did a similar thing when I was working for this engineering firm, which was my last job in corporate America before I left. Okay. I was trying to sell into Keurig, the coffee maker folks, to sell engineering services. And so, I researched them on LinkedIn and found out that we were a good match for them for a whole bunch of reasons and stuff. But I didn't know anyone there. And so just calling up and saying, hi, we're Acorn Product Development and we do engineering, sir, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
So I went into LinkedIn and I networked and I found out who some of the key people were in their engineering organization that I wanted to connect with or reach out to. And I found out how I was connected to those people. And it turns out I had some very good connections through people who I know into Keurig. So I reached out to those connections and they gave me a referral. My first meeting at Keurig was with 7 vice presidents.
Okay.
And I went from zero into a multi-million-dollar account in less than a year.
Wow.
But the only reason I was able to do that was because of networking. Well, not the only reason, but the primary thing that was the catalyst for that was the networking and using my network to get an introduction to somebody who is in a position who would be interested in what it is that I had to offer and was in a decision-making capability.
Yeah, definitely.
So networking is, I by far get more business out of networking and referrals than I do from any other thing.
So one thing, like I said, this is a great conversation we're having, and definitely I think people are gonna learn more. But my question is, what was your confidence level on your second career, first job, first big job? You're not in sales anymore. You just doing headshot.
Yeah. So I started out shooting friends, and then close, people who I knew, and I didn't charge money for it. And then I started charging for it, and people loved the work. But my first corporate job, where I had, I was shooting like on location and stuff, I was fairly nervous. And I made some mistakes. Okay. For example, when you shoot a headshot, you want to leave a little bit of room above somebody's head when you shoot, and then you want to crop it later on because it looks better if it's cropped, but you want to leave the room above the head versus, getting the lens closer, because some people don't like their head being chopped off.
Yeah.
Well, I had learned, because I had studied when I had decided to become a headshot photographer, I found out who the best headshot photographer was in the world. and I kind of already knew that because I had already been doing some studying, watching some videos and taking some courses and stuff. This guy named Peter Hurley out of New York City, and Peter, his trademark was chopping off people's heads. So I had kind of adopted that style, and I did my first corporate shoot on location. And the second person, I think it was, that I was shooting, he, after the shoot, after we were all done and stuff, and I post the images on a website, he said, "Gee, I really like these, but, can you not chop off the top of my head?" And I said, "No, because that's how I shot it." And he was pretty adamant. He wasn't happy. And, eventually he still wound up using the images and everything, but I learned a very big lesson from that, which is never crop in camera. Okay. So my next shoot, I didn't do that. The next shoot was actually larger. That was 40 people, 30 people, 35. Yeah, something like that. On location. And it actually went very well. People love the images and everything. And so I was a lot more comfortable and didn't make as many mistakes as I did the first time. But I also had never shot that many people in a day before. So I didn't really know, like, okay, should I allow 10 minutes per person, 15 minutes per person? How soon could I, and I kind of did it as you make it up as you go along. And I was successful in doing it and everything. And now, if I look at my process today versus back then, it's evolved, leaps and bounds. Even my work looks different today than it did back then. But they were happy with it back then, and they're thrilled with it now. So, you have to continue to evolve and grow your skills and what you do. And I'm always learning. I'm always looking at other photographers' work and, saying, "Oh, that looks cool. That's a good idea. I'm going to try that next time. And how did you do that?" And looking at the lighting and posing and all of that other stuff. I'm always learning. And part of my routine every day is to look at somebody else's work.
Okay.
So I'm always looking at somebody else's work.
No, thank you for sharing. But question now, how did you figure out how to price or to charge your client? Because that's something when you go on your own business, you need to do it. Yep. That's you. That's on you. That's your homework. So can you take us there?
Sure. So, and I do some of this to this day. So first of all, you need to understand who your competition is and what they're charging. And then you need to be honest with yourself and figure out, where are you in the evolution of your business? Are you well-known, in demand, the phone is ringing off the hook? That's going to be one price, and that price is probably going to be higher. If the phone isn't ringing, you don't have any clients, your work isn't necessarily even as good as some of the best out there, charging a lot of money is probably not going to necessarily be the way to get business.
Okay.
So, and by the way, you'll hear different stories from different people and different even photographers or whatever about pricing. But the way I price it, the way I started out my pricing, and my pricing has gone up over time, because as I've improved my skills and improved my value, I'm going to charge for that.
Okay.
I'm still not the most expensive. I would say I'm, quality wise, I think people would have a tough time if they took a look at the 5 or 4 top headshot photographers in Boston. I think you'd be hard pressed to see the difference. And most of us are frankly priced around the same at the higher level. Then there's a whole raft of other photographers whose work, they call themselves, they are professional photographers because they have a business. But, to the trained eye, you can see things in their work that isn't as good as, those of us who are, charging more or whatever it is, because there is a difference. And so for that difference, I'm going to charge. But I'm always keeping an eye on what my competition that I consider to be is, at the same level as I am. I'm always keeping an eye on where they're at price-wise. and just be in the same ballpark. And we're all, like I said, we're all, except for one guy who's off in the weeds someplace. He charges way too much.
Okay.
But we're all pretty much in the same ballpark for people who shoot with the level of quality for headshots that I do, and some of my colleagues do.
No, well said. So we have a section called Hot Topic. Hot Topic is where we ask questions people don't have a chance to really ask. So in terms of you being an engineer, a salesman, and now a headshot photographer, so why did you choose to go along with this? Well, I know you said in high school that's what you always did, but why making it as your primary business?
You mean photography or
Yes,
my other career?
Photography.
So when I was a kid, I used to look at Life magazine all the time. Life magazine it's no longer around, I don't think, but it was a magazine that came out once a week, and they just had wonderful images. It was like National Geographic today. The images are just breathtaking. And I always just love looking at the pictures. And I always, images and that kind of thing always just fascinated me. And I love taking pictures since I was a kid, like I said. And so, and I'd always sort of kept an eye on photographers and got more and more into it. And, somewhere in the back of my mind probably thought, that not necessarily a career in it for my entire career, but at some point I wanted to pursue it more seriously. And so it was one of those things that just kind of evolved, I think, over time. I love, and shooting people is interesting because that's been a newer twist for me. I used to shoot mostly birds and landscapes and stuff like that. Yeah. And people have become more and more of a subject matter for me. And I have to say, I'm enjoying it a whole lot more because to me, there's nothing more satisfying than a client coming to me who's never liked the way they looked in pictures, hates having their headshot taken, and then at the end of the session have this big smile on their face, feeling better about themselves because they actually like the way they like the way they look, and thanking me and saying it was a lot of fun, and right. I get a kick out of it. Obviously I love the revenue and stuff, but I get a kick out of it because I feel like I did some good. I helped that person. And, I also have an attitude about people as they look. Everybody's so self-conscious about the way we look, and it's crazy. I think everybody's attractive in their own way. I think I'm handsomer than Brad Pitt.
What? Yeah.
But seriously, people are so self-conscious about stuff like that. And, if I can help them feel differently about themselves and the way they look and realize that maybe some of the stuff that's going on in their head about the way they look is kind of overdone and everything, and they love their shot and they had fun, and by the way, the next time somebody takes a picture of them, they'll know a little bit better how to pose because I teach that during my sessions. It's a real win. It's great.
No, definitely. So now, like I said, with technology now, and people might think photography is easier. Do you think skills still matter?
Oh, absolutely. Because anybody can take a picture. We have, you have this. You can take a picture with this.
Yes.
And some of them take really good pictures with that. It's not about the gear. I mean, let me preface that. You need to have quality gear. Yes. Right. I mean, if you're going to be serious about it and you want to have a decent picture, you need to have decent gear. But having said that, it's not about the gear. It's about light, and it's about, in headshots, it's about expression and helping people to feel comfortable in front of a camera. And you can't do that with a selfie. I've seen people try, they try and have selfies, or they give the phone to their friend and they take a picture and it's in a parking lot, or even if it's against a white wall and everything. The difference is just kind of crazy. And even if you go to a quote unquote professional photographer, if we could do a screen share, I could show you an example, but my wife works in biotech, and she started a new job at a startup a couple of years ago. And they told her that, they were having a headshot photographer to come in to take pictures of the staff and all of this other stuff. And she said, well, my husband's a headshot. Well, he's coming in anyway, and they'd already scheduled it and stuff. So she went and had her headshot done. And during the day, when she was having it done, I get an email from her with an attached file and said, can you fix this? And I took one look at it and said, no. But if you come home, I'll set up the studio and, we can shoot it here. I mean, this was shot by a professional photographer here in Boston someplace. Her skin was blown out. She had her neck, the camera position and the lighting and everything. She had this huge gaping hole that appeared in her neck. Her head was in the wrong position.
Wow.
It was terrible. I looked at that and said, I've seen selfies better than that. And it turns out the rest of the staff wasn't happy with it either. And I wound up shooting them later on. But so she came home and I took her picture and, she submitted that. And then everybody wanted to have theirs looking like hers and all this other stuff. But the point is that it's not so much about the gear. I'm sure he had a good camera and he probably had professional lighting. He just didn't know what the hell to do with it. And so you need to know how to use the equipment, or use the best equipment that you have. People say, the photographers often say, what's the best camera? It's the one you have with you. If you see a scene,
you're right. Right.
And you haven't got your pro gear with you got to use what you have.
Yeah.
So then it's a question of lighting and composition and posing, and all of that is skills.
No,
it's learnable.
No, thank you. No, thank you for sharing, and that's good insight. So, this is Barry Braunstein. He's our guest today on our 10th episode, DP Podcast Live. You can check us on YouTube, Facebook. Barry, you want to talk about your new business now? Not new business, but your second career.
Sure.
Barry, so go ahead.
Thank you. So, great. You got my work up there. So my website. So these are examples of my work. By the way, these are all business people. There's not an actor. I don't believe. No, there's no actors in this particular view. I do headshots and portraits, both in studio and on location. You can see there's a level of consistency and lighting and expression in that these people are engaging. When you look at these people and you see their headshots, you want to meet them. And so that's what I help people do, is that I help people feel comfortable in front of a camera, look their best in front of a camera, and I deliver consistent results, whether you're an individual or a business. And I also do portraits. I don't have those up on my website yet, but because I primarily focus on business headshots. If you hate having your picture taken, or you haven't updated your LinkedIn profile in a while, or you're updating your website, which is a good thing to be doing these days because websites are becoming more and more critical. Update your headshot. You should do it every couple of years. And I'd be happy to work with you and provide you with the best headshots that you've ever had.
So will our followers get a discount if they've seen this episode? I have to try to get some order, man.
Everybody wants.
Would you get them like a promo code? We can post it on we'll talk about it, but at the end of the day,
we'll talk about it. We'll do something. Do something.
I know definitely you do a good job. Definitely. So last word for you, Barry.
Last words. Find your passion and drive a truck through it, but also make sure that you're realistic about it. because you do still need to feed your family and survive and all of this other stuff. And, definitely follow your dreams and everything, no matter when they are. And don't lose sight of them, because you never know when in your life you'll be able to be in a position to be able to pursue them. And don't be afraid to take risks, and don't be afraid to change careers either. I've met a lot of people who they get their degree in one thing and then they wind up doing something totally different, and they're thrilled about it. So don't be afraid to do that, but go into things with eyes open.
Thank you. This is our 10th episode with Barry Braunstein. He's a headshot photographer. You can check him online at barrybraunsteinphotography.com. This is our 10th episode with DP Podcast Live. Eddy Dacius. Every Wednesday, we got a new episode going on YouTube, Facebook, and on our website, dppodcast.com. Thank you for being with us. Have a good day. Hey, thank you for watching the Divine Purpose Podcast on YouTube. For more streaming with interesting guests and premium content, subscribe now on DP Podcast Live.